Peoples of the world, welcome back to the Dungeons and Cardboard Community Theater. Capital G here, bringing you a real deck played by a real player on our Discord group, and a big thank you to our alleged idiot for this piece of spice. Anhelo the Painter, one of the front-facing commanders from the new Capenna Precon series. And we're going to be spell slinging, but before we get into the meat and potatoes of this particular list, here's the meat and potatoes of my socials. Find us on Discord, using those details above. Of course, the Dungeons and Cardboard Discord group, the link is now on screen, as well as in the description below. It's our LGS away from our LGS, free to join and free to play. Board Game Arena, for those that are interested in European-style board games. I play turn-based, so whenever I have time to log in and take a turn, I will. And we've got lots of great games. We've got things like Agricola, we've got A Feast for Odin, Settlers of Catan, most recently Tigris and Euphrates, and so many more. So send me a DM with whatever game you want to play and we'll set it up. And of course Tik Tok, because Tik Tok is the lols. I don't know if we still say the lols anymore, but we do say Anhelo the Painter is a fabulous deck. Red, black, and blue for this Grixis / Maestros. Is it Maestros ? Commander. A 1/3 with Death Touch, and the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn has Casualty 2, which means we can sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater to copy said spell. And that's the theme of the deck, is copy the spells, then copy the copies of the spells, then copy the copies of the spells. Well, that's what we're doing. So why Clutch of the Undercity is my initial highlight? Well, I was talking to AI before I recorded, and he was telling me he kind of accidentally stumbled upon a win con here with Clutch of the Undercity. He put it in the deck as a way to tutor out a card of mana value 4. It's got Transmute, which means you can pay the 3 mana, discard this card at sorcery speed in order to go get a mana value card of 4 and put it in your hand. But if you cast the card, it says return target permanent. Note that it does not say non-land. It can hit lands. You can hit any permanent you like with this. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Its controller loses 3 life. Now imagine if you radiate that. That's right. So you cast Clutch of the Undercity, then you radiate it. Choose an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single permanent. For each other permanent or player the spell could target, copy the Clutch of the Undercity. So the idea, of course, here is that you stack it in such a way so that all your opponent's permanents return to their hand, and they lose 3 life per permanent return to their hand this way, and they're knocked out of the game. Fantastic way to end a game. It's spicy. Radiate's not the only card that has this effect, by the way. The Precon, I believe, came with Radiant Performer. So also for 5 mana, a Human Wizard with Flash, a 2/2. That's relevant for Anhelo. When this enters the battlefield, if you've cast it from a hand, choose a spell or an ability that targets only a single permanent or player. Copy the spell or ability for each other permanent or player it could target. Of course, does the exact same thing for us, so we've got a redundant feature. The fact that this could also react to activated or triggered abilities is so sweet. So, Radiant Performer, I'm a fan. Not the only combo in this deck. I've got one other combo to highlight. And of course, it's an Ashnod's Altar Infinite combo. You give Ashnod's Hamburger a hamburger and a fry, you have a combo. So what's the hamburger? Cormella, Glamour Thief. This 4 mana creature has haste, and it says 1, tap this to add blue, black, and red to your mana pool. Spend this only to cast instants or sorcery spells. Also, when this dies, we get to return up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand. So what are we bringing back to our hand? Goryo's Vengeance. Return a legendary creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. The creature gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So the idea here, of course, is we cast the Vengeance, bring back Cormella. We can use Cormella right away, so we activate her. Use it, activate her, sacrifice her to bring back Goryo's Vengeance to our hand. Cast Goryo's Vengeance again, and each time we're accumulating mana we have infinite red and blue mana for the purposes of casting instants and sorceries. Nice little combo piece here. Not to mention this is just an infinite storm count. And of course we've got lots of payoffs for that too. So before we look at some of those payoffs, let us look at our mana rocks, starting with the Arcane Signet, the Felwar Stone, Soul Ring, and the Talismans, the Pain Talismans. These are fantastic. Tap for a colorless mana if you don't need the colors. Take 1 point of damage if you do need the color. These are fantastic. They need to get reprinted more often, honestly. But it's good to see them get recent reprints in the Baldur's Gate set. One other artifact, it's not a mana rock, but it definitely gives us a lot of value, is the Twinning Staff. If you would copy a spell one or more times, this copies it an additional time. Yes, it's got the activated ability where you can pay 7, tap this to copy an instant or sorcery spell you control. Not likely going to activate it, unless the game goes very, very long, but just, you know, sitting there and copying copies. That's what we want. And we want to pay that off, so let's start with the Archmage Emeritus. Going through our creature streets that can really pay these off. Whenever we cast or copy a spell, draw a card. Yes, please. Bergi gives us more red mana every time we cast a spell. We're playing here mostly for the front face side. We could cast the back face, which lets us discard a card, exile the top 2 cards of our library. We may play those cards this turn. If we're in a crunch, a nice option to have, but she is definitely here for the front face. Dika, Fractal Theorist. Here's a good payoff, getting some tokens on the board. In this case, we're getting Fractal tokens. Yes, they're 0/0, but they also get 1/1 counters equal to the mana value of whatever spell we've cast or copied. Cast lets us recycle instants or sorceries by letting us cast 1 from our graveyard on each of our turns. Lear does the same thing by giving all of our instants and sorceries flashback. Has the added bonus of saying spells cannot be countered, a great way to protect our board if we're about to go off. Poppet Stitcher gets us 2/2 zombie tokens with Decayed every time we cast an instant or sorcery spell. If we've got a bunch of tokens, we could, on our upkeep, flip it into a Poppet Factory, turning everything into a 3/3. And then, of course, when it comes back to our upkeep again, we could flip it back. I don't see the need to turn it to the Poppet Factory. It's a very good card on the Poppet Factory side still, but that's the Poppet Stitcher triggers that we want. Sedgemoor Witch. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, create a pest token. So a great way to defend against the inevitable swings. People will swing, because they're going to have to. They're going to have to swing at us, and those tokens will block and gain us some life. The fact that she's also got Menace and Ward. Yes, 3 life is a very small blood price to play, but that's fine. It still does some damage to our opponents if they try to take this off the table. Stormkiln Artist. A monster of a card ever since its release in Strixhaven. Whenever we cast it or copy an instant or sorcery, we get to treasure. Yes, please. A long-time force to be reckoned with in our format is Talrand. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we get a 2/2 Drake with flying. Veyran. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, this gets +1/+1 until end of turn. But also, if casting or copying an instant or sorcery causes the triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So, yes, Spell Harmonicon. Absolutely, we love that. Young Pyromancer. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we get a 1/1 red elemental token. So those are the creatures that pay us off. How about some enchantments that pay us off with Metallurgic Summonings? This gives us XX tokens, where X is the mana value of the instant or sorcery spell we have cast. We could also dump 5 mana into this later on to return all instants and sorceries from our graveyard to our hand. We can only activate this if we control 6 or more artifacts. That's fine. It is still a fantastic card. The version we're seeing here looks funny, I know. It is the Kaladesh remastered version from Magic Arena. Some enchantments help us draw cards, such as Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study. Shark Typhoon, more flying tokens here, in this case flying sharks. Sharknado incoming. The Sorcerer class, great enchantment here. Red and blue, when this enters the battlefield, draw, then discard 2 cards. Amazing. Great way to filter cards in the early game. Once we level up to level 2, our creatures will be able to tap for blue or red mana, but only for the purposes of casting instants or sorceries, or to go up to level 3 on Sorcerer class. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, it deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of instants and sorceries we've cast this turn. So, we were talking about the Goyo's Vengeance combo earlier. This is one of the payoffs. When you get this to level 3, this will deal the damage and seal the game. 1000-Year Storm. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery we've cast before at this turn. For spell slinging, we're going nuts. 1000-Year Storm is just one of those ridiculously big commander cards. And of course, Underworld Breach. For 2 mana, this sits on the battlefield. Each non-land card in our graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exiling 3 other cards from our graveyard. Seems steep, but honestly, this wins games. Yes, at the beginning of our end step, we have to sacrifice the Underworld Breach, which means we only have the 1 turn to play with it. That's fine. All it takes is 1 turn to turn the tide of a game. Some Planeswalkers now. We got some Planeswalkers that help us pay off our spellcasting tricks, including Professor Onyx, which whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. The activated abilities are all excellent here as well, giving us card advantage, forcing our opponents to sacrifice creatures, etc. In a similar vein is Ral, which whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, this deals 1 damage to target opponent or Planeswalker. So again, if we're getting infinite cast triggers off of this, well, this is dealing infinite damage to our opponents and knocking them out of the game. The fact that this also has a fork effect attached to its -2 is super sweet. Saheeli rounds it out. Whenever you cast any non-creature spells, so not just instants and sorceries, but artifacts and enchantments as well, will trigger this. We get a 1/1 colorless servo to help defend our face with. So let's talk about the instants and sorceries that we've got here, shall we? Let's start with our instants. Battle Hymn, adding a red mana to our mana pool for each creature we control. That is a perfectly fair ritual effect, if you ask me. Big Score. To cast a spell, we have to discard a card, but then we get to draw 2 cards and create 2 treasures. Even better if we copy it. Super efficient card. Commit to Memory. We're looking at the Amonkhet remastered version here on screen, so I'll have to read the text from the Oracle. So for commit, it's put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library, second from the top. Great piece of tempo and removal there. Especially fun if somebody cracks a fetch land. Memory is the aftermath side, which means we can only cast Memory from our graveyard. Each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7. So a nice way to reset the game, as it were, if we need it. Speaking of cards that reset the game, Cyclonic Rift, returning all of the non-land permanents we don't control to its owner's hand. A card that's, in spite of its apparent, being everywhere, I don't actually see super often when I play my games. People generally know that Cyclonic Rift is a salty card, but considering that we don't exactly have any other ways of winning through combat, Cyclonic Rift is a good fit here. Dark Ritual, just for the quick mana boost. Deadly Dispute. We get to sacrifice an artifact or a creature as an additional cost. Draw 2 cards, create a treasure. Yes, please. Deflecting Swat. Change the target of a spell or ability. And if you have a commander on the battlefield, it's free. Expansion Explosion. Great little split card coming out of Ravnica Allegiance. Copy target instant or sorcery spell with mana value of 4. Fantastic on the explosions. On the expansion side, Explosion. I don't think Explosion is that great a card, but it does put in a lot of work every time I see it cast. Double red, double blue X is a very high cost, but deal out X damage, draw X cards. Yes, please. Flusterstorm. Counter an instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1, and it has Storm. So obviously it's a much more effective counterspell than it reads thanks to that storm trigger. Force of Negation. Our commander's on the battlefield. It's a free counterspell. Counters any non-creature spell. Fork. We're right on theme with Fork here. Copy a spell. Frantic Search. Draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. Classic. We've already talked about Goryo's Vengeance. So let's talk about the Increasing Vengeance. It's an upgraded Fork. Copy an instant or sorcery spell you control. Fork can copy any instant or sorcery regardless of who controls it. Increasing Vengeance only copies ours, but that's fine. If the spell was cast from a graveyard, copy it twice. That flashback makes it really easy to copy it twice. Make Disappear. Very fun counter magic piece here. This can be used to counter any spell unless the controller pays 2. And if we need to raise that cost a little bit, we can sacrifice a 1/1 in concept to this if we need it. Mana Drain is just a hard counter, and it also rewards us with a bunch of mana if we successfully resolve it. Memory Deluge, 4 mana for this instant. The first time we cast it, likely from our hand, we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library, keep our best 2. Once we flash it back, we get to look at 7 cards and keep our best 2. Muddle the Mixture. It's a counter as well as a tutor piece. Mystical Tutor. Go get one of our instants and sorceries, put it on the top. Narset's Reversal. This is a counter spell and a fork all in one. It doesn't say counter spell. What it does say is copy an instant or sorcery, then return it to its owner's hand. So if somebody throws a lightning bolt at your direction, for example, Narset's Reversal can not only send that lightning bolt back to its owner's hand, but then we also get to choose a new target for the copied version of the spell. Perplex. It's a weird counter spell, but it also is a weird tutor. Still a good fit here. Rapid Hybridization. Turn something into a 3/3 frog. Snap. Return a creature to its owner's hand and then untap 2 lands. Yes, please. Shoal Satyr. Each opponent sacrifices their creature or planeswalker with the highest mana value. Tragic Slip. Great piece of removal here. Vampiric Tutor, of course one of the best tutors in the format. Yes, it puts the card on top, but that's fine. Bonus Hunger. If we don't have the City's Blessing, and this is the only card in the deck that gives us the City's Blessing for the record, so if we don't already have it, each opponent sacrifices a creature. If we do have the City's Blessing, which we could get if we have 10 or more permanents on the battlefield when we cast this, each of our opponents would have to sacrifice half the creatures they control rounded up. Now the downside, of course, is that our opponents get to choose which creatures they keep, but still, taking some pressure off the board is always a good thing. Some sorceries now with Bonus Round, which until end of turn, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery, that player copies it and may choose new targets for the copy. Demonic Tutor, go get the best thing in our deck. Exsanguinate, likely the best thing in our deck. Gust of Wind. This returns an online permanent we don't control to its owner's hand. Draw a card. If you manage to radiate this, that is a huge tempo swing. It doesn't end the game, but it definitely swings it in your favor. Strike It Rich gets us a treasure token. We can flash it back later if we want. And Vandal Blast to blow up all of the artifacts. And that is AI's Anhelo deck. He does have what he calls the lottery, like a set of 5 cards that he keeps aside that he can swap in whenever he feels like. Those 5 cards being Expropriate, Finale of Revelation, Mind's Desire, which is a big one in this deck I would think, Part the Water Veil, which yes, you can pay the 9 to awaken, and if you have enough mana to radiate it, you turn all your lands into creatures and take that many turns. And Temporal Extortion, which he'll like randomly shuffle in just to spice up the deck a little bit. So I thought that was a fun little touch. Cards that I would use to kind of spice it up a little bit. We're gonna take one from his sideboard. He's got a maybe board that includes Primal Amulet. I don't think Primal Amulet is a maybe. I think it's more of a, it's not a must, but it should be in there. Being able to reduce the cost of our instants and sorceries is huge. And the fact that this flips over into a land that copies instants and sorceries that this helps cast the card should be in the main. One card that I did not see AI consider, and don't ask me where you would put this, but Dualcaster Mage is right on theme. Not only does this at instant speed copy a spell, but it's a 2/2, which means Anhelo can sacrifice the Dualcaster Mage to copy a spell later on afterwards. So that is kind of my thinking here. And one other spell that he was not considering, because he already runs both Ral and Professor Onyx, I was a little surprised not to see Chain of Smog here. The combo, of course, being with one of those two planeswalkers out, you cast Chain of Smog, you target yourself, and then you keep copying it. So yes, you discard your hand, but then you're getting the triggers off of Ral or Professor Onyx and wiping out the rest of the table while you're at it. So that's an infinite damage combo piece that AI is not running here, but again, I'm not sure if he wants to, and even if he did, I'm not sure what he would take out to make it happen. But he's definitely made a really, really sweet deck here happen. I believe I've played against it at least once, although it didn't go off that game. But always a good time to play against AI or anyone else of the Dungeons and Cardboard Discord group. As you can tell, this is like take 76, and I'm getting tired, so I am going to head out the door, get ready for work. But before I go, be sure to check out the channel up here, as well as a couple of my more recent videos over here. And I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.